Howdy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Leadership Forum hosted by President Bush. About a half an hour ago, we opened the baseball exhibit over at the library, Born to Play Ball. Exhibit, I urge you all to go see, and I'll say a little bit more about it later. But right now, what I'd like to do is introduce some of the panelists that will be participating tonight. We're pleased to have with us a number of sports celebrities, both in baseball and general sports, who have been able to join us tonight to celebrate the opening of this baseball exhibit. Joining us tonight are Joe Morgan, who is a all-star baseball second baseman for the Reds and the Astros. Jeff Bagwell, a great Houston Astros player. Bob Costas, who's a famed NBC sports broadcaster. Tommy Lasorda, who has coached the Los Angeles Dodgers for 20 years. And Drayton McClain, current owner of the Houston Astros. Please sit down, gentlemen. I'd like to thank Drayton McClain in particular for his support of the baseball exhibit over at the library. It was through his generous support and that of the Houston Astros that exhibit was made possible. So, Drayton, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York, for their support of this exhibit. It was through their generous provision of a number of artifacts that we were able to put this exhibit on. In particular, I'd like to note that Dale Petrosky, President of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, is with us. And Dale, please, thank you very much. As you can see, we have a packed house today, and indeed we have an overflow crowd. We have a number of our guests joining us in the adjoining auditorium, and they are viewing the proceedings on closed-circuit TV. I ask those guests to remain seated because afterwards the panelists and the president will come over and say hi to all of you there. Now, a special treat for everyone. At the conclusion of our program tonight, I invite all of you to go across the plaza to the museum to view the exhibit on baseball and to partake in a little baseball fun fair, so to speak. We will be serving hot dogs, Cracker Jacks, soda, peanuts. There we go. As you can see, our panelists are ready to go. I just urge all of you, if you have any questions, hold them till the end. They'll be happy to take your questions. Those of you who want to post questions, as you can see, there are microphones located in the side aisle to the front of the auditorium. And please ask that you use those microphones to pose your questions. And please make it a question, not a statement, for brevity's sake. And ladies and gentlemen, now it's my great pleasure to call upon the host of this evening, our first President of the United States, George Bush. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Please, be seated. Come on, you guys. Come on. Thank you all very much. I'm thrilled to see this turnout. And all of these people that you'll hear from in a minute are friends, and they are wonderful, wonderful influences in the game of baseball, and we're very fortunate to have them here at College Station. There's a time in my young life when I was absolutely convinced that I would be the next Lou Gehrig. Yes, those childhood dreams die hard, and I used to keep my baseball glove from my baseball days at Yale in my desk at the Oval Office, thinking that a call might come in from Steinbrenner or something like that. Never happened. But I'm still ready, and I was ready to throw out the first pitch at the Aggies game the other day, and the cold weather got me, but I thought I'd wear my uniform anyway. Enough. What do you think? guys are getting mic'd. Are you mic'd yet?
We're ready to go.
They're ready. I want to point out that not all the sports stars are on the stage here tonight. Is Mike Sherman here? He was going to come, and I don't see him, but here he is over here. Mike, welcome. We're glad to see you here. Modest guy, didn't get a seat in the front row. RC is here. Where's RC, my pal, a great football legend? There he is. R.C. Slocum. Rob Childress is here, our baseball coach. Thank you for this. And Joe Evans, my pal, who coaches our ladies baseball team. So with no further ado, and another expression of gratitude, I want to thank you guys for coming, and I'll turn it over. My role of running these leadership forums has been unbroken string until now, and then I'm upstaged by Costa, so we're delighted to see you. Bob, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. What we're going to do here is ask each of the panelists to give us kind of a brief overview or remembrance about what the game has meant to them, and then after we've each done that, as was mentioned, we'll open it up to questions and answers from the audience. So, Joe, why don't you lead us off?
Well, I wasn't a very good lead-off hitter, but I like his second. Well, first of all, it's an honor for me to be invited here by the President, so thank you for that. And it's always an honor to be in the company of Mr. Costas and Mr. Lasorda and Jaden McLean, and Jeff is one of my close friends, so this is a good panel. I have to tell you, I just love baseball. I grew up in a household that admired baseball, just loved baseball. My dad was a baseball player, and unfortunately for my dad, Jackie Robinson was younger than he was, and he obviously didn't have a chance to play in the major league. But I was the bat boy, my dad, my uncles, they were all very good baseball players, so it kind of came natural to me to enjoy the game. And my love for the game is such that it allows a little 5'5" second baseman from Oakland, California to go play in the major leagues and make it to the Hall of Fame. That's what baseball is all about to me. Baseball is not like other sports, and I quote one of my good friends, Brian Gumbel, said, he said, baseball is a love. The other sports are just sports. And by that, I take it to mean that once you're touched by the baseball bug, you'll love it forever. I mean, I'm going to go to my grave.
Mike or RC.
Yeah. Well, I get it was Brian Gumbel that made the quote, so I give it to him. But I do. I mean, I have to say that baseball is such a great sport. I know football, we get millions of people watching the Super Bowl. But baseball on a daily basis, people just love to follow the stats. They follow the scores every single day. And for the last 4 years, baseball has just continued to climb as far as attendance records is concerned. So baseball is still the greatest sport in the world, in my opinion. Sorry, Mike. But it's an honor for me to be here. And look, I just think the game is growing and it's getting better all the time. And I think television has had a lot to do with it, good and bad. But I really think that you're going to see in the next few years baseball become more global and more, sophisticated, so to speak, as far as television is concerned. But it's just going to continue to grow, and it's all because of the fans, because the fans are the ones that make the game great. And I said all the time when I go broadcast, and as I tell you to broadcast with Bob, I don't broadcast for the players, I don't broadcast for the owners, I broadcast for the fans. I want to try to connect with you guys, because the owners may not like what I say sometimes, the players do not like what I say sometimes. But I want to broadcast for the fans, and you are the fans that makes the game such a great sport. So continue to enjoy the game.
Jeff Bagwell scarcely needs introduction in front of a crowd in this neck of the woods. Could have been a Boston Red Sox, but a trade brought him to the Houston Astros, and he put together numbers that will make him worthy of Hall of Fame consideration up until his recent retirement. So here's your own Jeff Bagwell.
You said you weren't that good at that. You did a nice job. I again would like to thank President Bush for inviting me. It truly is an honor to be around you and to be in your presence. So thank you for having me here. I like Joe. My family, my father and my mother were rabid Boston Red Sox fans. They grew up in Boston, so I had no choice but to love baseball right from the get-go. I didn't know much about the Houston Astros back then, or really anybody. All I knew is I hated the Yankees. And that's the way my life went for a long time. But baseball, like Joe said, it gets into your system. It's something. When I played, I would watch 3 games. I'd watch the Cubs play in the afternoon. I watched our game when I played, and then I'd go home and I'd put on the Dodgers or Tommy, or I'd put the Giants or whoever I could get the late game on. I just can't get enough of baseball, and baseball has done so much for me, obviously. A kid from Connecticut sitting in Texas right now in front of you all talking. I have 2 children, a beautiful wife. Mr. McClain has taken care of me, obviously, for 15 years. I wouldn't have that without baseball. So again, it really is. It's something that just gets in your blood, and you just can't get enough. And I still, to this day, I cannot stop watching the game. It's something that's a passion. As Joe said, it's a love. It's a passion too. It's little things that happen during a game that make you love the game so much. It really is a tremendous sport, and I feel very blessed to have played it, and I feel very blessed to still be a part of it.
I think that from the standpoint of a guy who didn't play beyond high school but still retains a connection to the game, baseball is, if you're inclined to do it, let's say if you could broadcast every sport, in many respects baseball is the best announcer's sport because of the pace of the game. It allows not only for description, you have to be able to call plays accurately, but it allows for a little bit of humor and conversation with your partner and a little bit of reflection, anecdotal material, comparisons to history. It has a longer and deeper history than any other American team sport. The statistics and records matter most. I think as much as I love the NBA or the NFL, I think it's fair to say that very few fans can tell you off the top of their heads how many career points Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had, or how many Karl Malone or Michael Jordan or Jerry West had, or exactly how many rushing yards Walter Payton or Emmitt Smith had, or exactly how many touchdown passes Dan Marino threw for before Brett Favre broke the record. But if you say to even a casual baseball fan, 56 straight games, 406, 714 home runs, and then 755 home runs, people know what that means. They know instantly what those numbers are about, and they're benchmarks not only in the game's history, but in our lives as the game is handed down from generation to generation. Listening to Joe speak, I'm reminded of the years I spent broadcasting games with him on NBC. Sometimes it was just me and Joe. On other occasions, it was a 3-man booth. Me, Joe, and Bob Uecker. And you want to talk about, here's a guy, the mere mention of his name and hilarity ensues. And pretty much the die was cast with Uecker's first professional experience. He was a high school catcher in Wisconsin, and a scout for the then Milwaukee Braves came to the Uecker family home, sat around the kitchen table with his parents, and said, "We'd like to sign your son for $5,000. And Uecker's father said, "This family doesn't have that kind of money." And they signed him anyway. And boy, did it pay dividends. Career batting average of exactly 200, 14 lifetime homers in 7 big league seasons with 6 different clubs. So here we are broadcasting the '95 World Series. The Indians and the Braves were in Atlanta. Game 6 turned out to be the final game. I'm in the middle. Uecker's on my left. Joe's on my right. And Joe starts talking about his own World Series experiences with the Big Red Machine. Now, what a contrast. Here's one of the greatest second basemen of all time. First ballot Hall of Famer, 2-time National League MVP, combination of speed and power, and played on one of the legendary teams in the history of the game, the Big Red Machine. So he's talking about Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and Sparky Anderson and Tony Perez. And when he's done, just to be polite and have to amuse myself, I turn to Uecker. I say, "Uecker, you ever play in the World Series?" This is on the air. "Uecker, you ever play in the World Series?" He says, "Well, I was with the Cardinals in '64, but when we played the Yankees in the series, I was on the disabled list." I said, "What was wrong with you?" He said, I had hepatitis. I said, how did you get that? He said, the trainer injected me with it. Which may account for why the Cardinals won that World Series over the Yankees. But that's the nature of baseball. It's a storyteller's game. It's a game of history. It's a game about which we don't just feel excitement or interest. We feel a connection and we feel fondness. And I'm sure all of you who are here tonight wouldn't be here if you didn't have that same kind of connection, that same kind of fondness for the game. And now, truly, I don't want to cut into his time with a lengthy introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Tommy Lasorda.
Thank you very much for that introduction.
With heartfelt.
Best I've had. I want to thank the President for allowing us to be here tonight. I want to thank the members of the forum up here that to give of their time to come. I'm honored to be sitting on the same stage with them. But baseball, that's been my life. I can remember not a couple of weeks ago when I started to go to spring training. My wife said, where are you going now? I had to make a speech. She said, where are you going now? I said, I have to go make a talk. She said, you're not going out and make another speech, are you? I said, yeah, I have to go. She said, well, you want to know something? I finally realized after being married to you for 58 years that you love the Dodgers and baseball more than you love me. I said, yeah, but I love you more than I do football and basketball. You know, when I was about 14, 15 years old, I used to go to sleep and I used to actually dream that I was pitching in Yankee Stadium. Dickie was my catcher, and Gehrig first base, Babe Ruth in the outfield, Joe DiMaggio. And it seemed so real. And then all of a sudden, I'd feel my mother shaking me and saying, wake up, Tommy. It's time to go to school. I said, why didn't she leave me alone? Why did she take me away from that dream? It was so real. And then when I was inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame, I said, I can't believe I'm standing at this podium. And probably I'll feel my mother shaking me and saying, wake up, Tommy, it's time to go to school. I've lived a dream. You know, when you're a manager, you don't hit the ball, you don't throw the ball. What success you achieve becomes a reality only because of the contributions of your players. They're the ones that put me in the Hall of Fame. And in the 20 years I managed the Dodgers, 210 managers were fired. So it's very indicative that you got to win to get into the Hall of Fame. And baseball's been played for over 100 years. There are only 16 managers in the Hall of Fame. And to tell you how much I wanted to win, I can remember we went into Cincinnati to play the Big Red Machine. Man, these guys were powerful. And I got to thinking about Morgan, Bench, those guys. So I said, I better go to church. Sat in the church, and who came in and sat right next to me but the manager of the Cincinnati Reds? Well, I looked at him. I knew why he was there, and he knew why I was there. And at the conclusion of the Mass, he and I were walking out the center aisle together. And I'm looking at him. I said, this guy don't know it, but he's going to get his brains beat out tonight. We got to the front door, and he said to me, wait for me outside. Tommy, I'll be right out. I said, okay. And I said, where's he gone? The service is over. And I looked at him, went over to the side of the church, and he knelt down and he lit a candle. And instead of going through the front door, I went over to this side of the church, And when he left, I went down and blew that candle out. I knew he wasn't lighted that candle for a dead relative. All throughout the game, I kept on, hey, Mac, ain't going to work, pal. I blew it out. We clobbered him that day, 13-2. In fact, about 9 months ago, he and his wife, Ellen, went on a vacation to Italy, and I received a postcard. All it said was, try blowing this one out. Baseball has been my life. I've managed the Dodgers for 20 years, and I feel that I have been really blessed to be able to come from the third string pitcher on the Norristown, Pennsylvania high school baseball team. And you know what a third stringer on a high school team is, don't you? You're worthless. And in the big leagues, but to be replaced by the greatest left-hand pitcher in the game, Sandy Koufax. The general manager called me in. He said, Tommy, I got bad news. I said, what is it, Buzzy? I said, one of your relatives sick? He said, no, I'm going to have to send you back to Montreal. I said, Buzzy, I won 18 games back there last year. What do I have to do to prove that I can pitch here? He said, Tommy, I got a tough job. I got to cut one guy off of this club. If you were sitting in this chair, who would you send out? I said, Koufax. Swear to God, true story. I said, here's a guy who can't hit a barn door 60 feet away, and you're telling me I've got to go and he's going to stay? And he said, look, the rules of baseball provide that if you give a guy over $4,000 bonus, he had to remain on a major league club for 2 years. So you go, and he stays. And now, I can honestly and truthfully say, it took one of the greatest left-hand pitchers in all of baseball to knock me off of that Brooklyn club, and I still think they made a mistake.
It's hardly fair, is it, Drayton? It's hardly fair that you have to follow Tommy. Just an observation before we get to Drayton McClain. There are a few Secret Service people in the audience, and I am impressed. I guess it's not quite Buckingham Palace stuff, but you know I know who these Secret Service guys are now because we spent several hours here today, and everyone else is cracking up, and the Secret Service guys are. You can laugh. I'm telling you, you can laugh. This is funny stuff. One of the most gracious men in baseball, and a guy who runs his team not just as a business, but as an extension of his love of the game, is Drayton McClain, the owner of the Houston Astros.
Thank you, Bob. And Mr. President, thank you for hosting this today and your vision to bring baseball to your museum. You're a great asset to America and the entire world, and we respect you and admire you, but thank you for making Major League Baseball part of this. And we really miss the official scorekeeper of the Houston Astros, Barbara. That when she comes to the game, she meticulously scores the game. And she asked me several times in the past, now how do you score this complicated play? And I had to admit to her, I had no idea. So she made it work. But thank you for what you mean to America and the world and to baseball. It's an honor to be here today. And if you hadn't felt the competitiveness of baseball, I think you sensed it after hearing these gentlemen talk about baseball and what it means to them. And baseball to Elizabeth and I means a great deal. This is the 16th year that we have owned the Houston Astros. It's been a most unusual experience for us. I grew up in a small town in Central Texas and was on the high school team. And I got the message when my coach said, "I sure hope you plan to go to college." That meant I wasn't a very good player, but I enjoyed the game and respected the game and followed the game. I got involved in business, and it shows in life we can have plans for our lives and goals for our lives, but life takes unusual twists and turns. One day in 1992, I got a phone call from Ben Love, who was one of the most respected leaders in Texas. He was the CEO of Texas Commerce Bank, and Bob Armstead, who was the owner of the Randall supermarket chain in Texas and Tom Thumbs in Dallas. And he was a customer of our company, and Ben Love I owed some money to, so I had the list of those two. And they said, "Why don't you come down here and talk to us? A group of us are trying to buy the Houston Astros, and we want you to be part of it." And I told them, I said, I had never spent 1 minute of my life thinking about owning a professional sports team. So I just kidded them. I said, "I'm going to hang up and move on." And they said, "No, come down. I think you'll find it interesting." So out of the respect for those two individuals, I went to Houston, and this group negotiated with John McMullen. Well, several of you knew John McMullen well, and John was a good person, but he was one tough negotiator. And the group fell apart. And I thought, well, I've never tried to do anything in my life that I didn't succeed at. And I thought this would be a good challenge. I think I'd like to do this. So I called Bob Armstead and Ben Love. I said, "If you don't object, I would like to pursue this on my own." I had no clue why I wanted to do this. Have any of you ever done something like that? But it seemed like a challenge, and it seemed like something great to do. And they said, "Well, with all you know about the Houston Astros and in 1992, the state of baseball, go ahead and do it." And so we purchased the Houston Astros, and Elizabeth and I had two goals: to be a champion. They'd been a team since 1962. They traded away the greatest asset, Joe Morgan, and some of the other great players that they had. And I thought, boy, if we can work together and through leadership and dedication, become a champion. The second goal was to use the great asset that we love about baseball, the respect the public has for it, and get our players like Jeff Bagwell involved into the community and community programs. That would be something we would love to do at this stage of our lives. So we purchased the Houston Astros. It's been a magnificent experience. Baseball, you've heard how they have been captured by baseball, and after 36 years in the grocery logistics business, I've been captured by baseball. And the unusual thing is, baseball is memories. This is what they related to. It's memories, it's great things you experience. And I remember growing up in the 50s in Central Texas, and my father took me to St. Louis to a baseball game. I can tell you about the train ride up there, the hotel we stayed in, the games we saw the Cardinals play in St. Louis, and the trip home. And that was over 60 years ago, and I can tell you every part of that. I've been to hundreds of other football and basketball games. I can't really reach back to those, but I can remember the baseball games that we've been to. So it's been a great experience being involved with the Houston Astros and baseball as a whole. I think one of the great institutions of Joe Morgan and what he played, and Tommy, the years that he had, and that Jeff Bagwell played his entire major league career, 14 years with the Houston Astros, or Craig Biggio played his entire career with the Houston Astros. I think that's part of baseball we need to bring back, where young men come, get really successful. I'm certainly no baseball expert. Here's the group that is. But I'm an observer of leadership and what happens, and I think baseball is the key fabric in American society today. Tommy talked about it's over 100 years, and we can all relate to the baseball players and eras that they played in, and that's inspirational to each of us. As Joe talked about, a young man from Oakland coming and being in the Hall of Fame. That's who we admire, we look up to. Baseball players and the game and the owners are held to a different standard than any other sport that we have. So it's been a great honor for Elizabeth and I to have been involved with the Houston Astros in Major League Baseball.
All right.
o'clock on the dot, so it's time to turn it over to you folks in the audience. And obviously there are microphones, standing microphones in each aisle. So whoever wants to be the brave soul, and my experience with this stuff is somebody's got to break the ice, and once that happens, then the floodgates open. So whoever's going to be the first brave soul to step up and ask a question to one member of the panel or another, we can get things going. 500 people show up, and nobody has a question. Tommy, I was going to ask you this. This gentleman's making his way to the microphone, saving me from asking the question. Yes, sir.
Being here, and my question is for Tommy Lasorda. Could you just share your memories if you would have been on the same team with Jackie Robinson?
Well, I was very fortunate to be on the team with him because he was, without a doubt, one of the greatest competitors I ever saw. He played the game to the highest. And we hated the Giants. And when he got traded to the Giants, he said, no way I'm going to walk in that clubhouse. And he quit because of that tremendous desire to beat them. He wasn't going to walk in there and play with them. And he was by far one of the greatest competitor. And I can remember playing against the Cubs. And Sad Sam Jones was pitching. And Jackie was on deck, and he said to him, Sam, I'm going to get on the base. I'm going to steal second. I'm going to steal third. And I'm going to steal home. And by God, he did it.
You know, it's one of the things about Jackie Robinson that some portion of the public doesn't understand. It's this mythology. It's based on a portion of the truth, but people think it's the entire truth. That because he was the first to break the modern color barrier, and Branch Rickey did have that conversation with him, where he said, look, at least at the start, I know what a competitor you are, but if this is going to work, people are going to insult you, they're going to go out of their way to spite you, they'll try and hurt you, and you have to hold your competitive instincts in check, and you have to be willing, at least at the start, not to fight back. And a lot of people think that's the entire story. And they think that Jackie Robinson was a mild and sort of compliant guy throughout his life. That is not true. Jackie Robinson stood up against segregation in the military, almost got court-martialed because he wouldn't go to the back of the bus. Jackie Robinson didn't take guff from anybody. When he played briefly in the Negro Leagues, Buck O'Neill tells the story of how for 20 years the team had filled up at a certain gas station along the way because they traveled by bus. But they could never eat inside in the restaurant, and they couldn't use the restroom. And they got out, and they stuck the pump in the gas tank. It's a big bus. It's a lot of gas. It's a big sale. And Jackie headed for the restroom. And the proprietor said, quoting the vernacular of the day, the proprietor said, boy, you know you can't use that restroom. And Jackie Robinson turned around and said, take the hose out of the bus. Take the pump out. And he hung it back up, hung the nozzle back up. The guy came running and I said, you can use the restroom, but be quick.
Be quick.
Yeah, but be quick, you know. And then after those 2 or 3 years went by, and a flood of black players followed Jackie Robinson in the major league, like Tommy said, you know, Jackie Robinson would do anything to beat you. Joe knows, you know, better than I do. Joe was an active player while Jackie was still alive. One of the great regrets of my career as a broadcaster, I never met Jackie Robinson. He died in 1972, but he was a wicked competitor, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I grew up idolizing two guys, Nellie Fox and Jackie Robinson. I got a chance to meet both, of course, and I had a chance to play with Nellie Fox. My rookie year here in Houston, Nellie Fox was the player coach. And so I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, to be honest with you. Here's Nellie Fox, the guy that I idolized, and I'm on a team with him. And Jackie Robinson, I had a chance to meet him, you know, and I'm very proud because I'm on the board of directors of his foundation that his wife Rachel has started. My first chance of meeting Jackie, I had always idolized him from afar. And he was broadcasting for the game of the week with, I think it was Pee Wee Reese, but he was doing the game. Can't remember who was with him. But we were going to play in that game in San Francisco. And I just couldn't wait to get to the ballpark the next day to say hello to him. And I had all these questions I wanted to ask him about, you know, what had gone on and so forth. So I get to the park. I probably got there about 10 o'clock. The game was at 1. I was waiting for him when he walked on the field, and I went over to him. And all of a sudden I looked at him, I couldn't say anything. And I looked at him, all these questions had gone away, and I just said to him, I said, thank you. And he looked me in the eyes and he smiled and he said, you're welcome. And so all the time I got a chance to talk to him, and as Bobby says, in 1972 we were playing the World Series in Cincinnati, and that was his last public appearance. And I remember almost verbatim the words he said. He said, it's been great, but I'll not be happy until there's a black face managing in the dugout. And then he passed away a few weeks later. So, and I've always said to Frank Robinson, you got to live Jackie Robinson's dream, because he wanted to be a manager, and he never had the opportunity. He was never given the opportunity to be a manager. But he was, as he said, all those things. He was a fierce competitor. But his wife tells you the story of how great a family person he was. So he was a great individual.
Hi. This question is for Jeff Bagwell and Drake McLean. I wanted to know what your favorite moments in Astros history have been.
Jeff, favorite moment?
Well, I have a few. For me, it was opening day. Excuse me. Opening day in 1991 against the Reds was obviously a big moment. I think everybody can remember the first opening day. But I look back, and it really, most of it has nothing to do with me. It's team stuff and for other individuals. I look back at Darryl Kyle throwing a no-hitter. I've never, at that particular time, had felt so much joy for one particular person in a sports setting. We won. In 1997, we won our division, I guess, and that was a big moment for the team, because we tried for so long, came up kind of short for a few years in a row, and to finally get over that hump was a huge moment for, I think, our franchise at the time and for us as players. I look back to obviously 2005 when we finally made the World Series. Was a huge step for our organization. And then as recent as last year, when you saw Craig Biggio get his 3,000 hit, that I had a chance to be there for, that was a really special moment for me, because again, I knew what he'd been through in his entire career, and to get to that moment, to have 3,000 hits and to see the joy on his face and the relief, that was pretty special. That ranks right up there with a lot of them. And a funny story about that is, I was away on vacation with my family. So I said, you know what, I better get back for this. So I get on a plane, I get back, and I come in on Thursday, and I told him he had 3 hits left to get there, and I said, hey, listen, dude, I'm out of here Saturday morning. So you got 2 days. And he's like, no way. And then he got 5 hits that night. So that was a nice time. So those are my special moments.
Great.
Well, any of mine are what Jeff shared, but for Elizabeth and I was the first game in 1993 when we had opening day at the Astrodome playing Philadelphia. That was a great memory. The best memory is not even close, though, is in St. Louis when we got that final out where that fly ball was hit in the bottom of the ninth. Jason Lane caught it, and in 43 years, it was the first time the Houston Astros were on the way to the World Series. So that was a wonderful experience for all of us. I was excited for Texas and all the Houston Astro fans. That's what makes baseball great, and for our players that were there. So that was just a wonderful, rewarding experience. And then playing in the World Series was a great experience. Those were good, but being around people like Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio, their entire career has been with the Astros. They have been so important to our franchise and how they have conducted themselves personally as players and how they both respect the game. I think that's one of the great memories I saw. We didn't know it when we were getting into baseball, but it's an important part of our life. And Elizabeth and I consider owning the Astros a very, very important responsibility to the public and to the game of baseball.
Yes, sir.
Mr. had a fantastic career as a player, but my question is directed to you and Mr. Nance. from your announcing days at the games, and out of all the thousands of memories.
In a way, I could take some small offense. on the other hand, Jim Nantz is about 6'3", so I'm gonna let it go. I don't mind.
I apologize. I sat up here for about 5 minutes thinking of my question.
Call me Brent, call me Marv. It doesn't matter.
Is Joe Buck all right?
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to tell you a true story. This is a true story. I think I told you this. I swear to God, this story's true. I'm walking down the street in New York about 2 years ago with my wife. Young African-American guy, about 25 years old, says, Brian! He goes, Brian, I love your work. And I say, you know what? I have had it with this for so long. I'm Greg Gumbel, not Brian Gumbel. I'm so tired of being confused with my brother. And the guy says, oh, Greg, I'm sorry. I love you too. I was on the shuttle a few years ago from D.C. to New York, and I'm getting off. Sometimes the pilot will stand, in the doorway of the cockpit and bid you goodbye, and I'm walking off, and a light of recognition kind of goes off in his eyes, and he says, "Thanks for flying with us, Marv." And I'm thinking I may resemble Brian Gumbel more than I resemble Marv Albert. I don't know where this confusion comes from. So you're not alone. Continue.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I let the nervousness get the best of me. My question is, as announcers and how many amazing games and moments, particularly that y'all have both seen and been there to call, is there any particular moments that stand out as at the time seeing, wow, that was something I'll know that I'll never forget that'll stand out of all the moments that I've seen?
Well, for me, it goes back to almost what Drayton and Jeff were talking about. My first year broadcasting, I was broadcasting for the Cincinnati Reds, and I was doing their games, and Pete Rose was closing in on Ty Cobb's record. And each game I was doing, he'd get closer. And the game that he broke the record, I was broadcasting the game in Cincinnati. Now, I grew up, I played with this guy for 8 years in Cincinnati and Philadelphia. We'd lockered next to each other all those 8 years, and we were the two closest guys on the Big Red Machine. So it was a very emotional night for me just to do the game, first of all. And then after the game, they asked me to do an interview with him, and I'm doing an interview, and I'm very emotional. Pete saying, "Man, I got the hit. I should be the one emotional, not you." But that's still, and I mean that's still the highlight of all the broadcasts I've ever done, was to be able to see a teammate of mine reach that pinnacle, and I'm broadcasting the game. As Jeff said, he was sitting there watching Craig do it. I was broadcasting when Pete did it, and we all got out and yelled, and I'm screaming, and like everybody else on the air. So that's my favorite game. And of course, the next favorite to me would be working in the World Series with Bob Costas. The World Series is something special. It's what everybody wants to get to. Everybody wants to play in the World Series. Every player wants to play. And I would think that every broadcaster would want to broadcast the World Series game, and I had the privilege of doing those two. So mine ranks Pete Rose first, and then the World Series second.
I'll give you three. The first two, real quick, non-baseball. Hosting the '96 Olympics in Atlanta, and Muhammad Ali lights the torch, and only about 4 or 5 people in the whole world knew it was going to be him. It was like a state secret. And Dick Enberg and I, who were hosting the opening ceremony, were hosting it together. We did not know. And Janet Evans, the Olympic swimmer, was the last one. I think she got it from Evander Holyfield, and she ran up the steps, and she handed it to Ali, and he kind of stepped out of the shadows, and the state that he's in now, and his hand was trembling, and the contrast between what he was and what, at least physically, he was by that time, and yet the grace that he showed in lighting the torch. Every single person there had goosebumps. And then another would be what should have been Michael Jordan's last play in the NBA. I called that basket that won the championship, the 6th Chicago championship over Utah in '98. And normally, Michael has a good sense of, and he should have known that no ball player in any sport ever had a better exit line than that. Ted Williams hit a homer in his last time at bat, but it wasn't the 7th game of the World Series. And he turned a 1-point deficit into a win in the championship, and then he decided to come back a couple of years after that. And when I see him, I said, "Michael, I had a little place in the time machine, in the time capsule. You messed it up. My call doesn't matter anymore because you had to come back and take a curtain call." And the other involving baseball involves Tommy. 1988 World Series Game 1. Oakland is an overwhelming favorite against the Dodgers. The Dodgers somehow have upset the Mets, and they've gotten into the World Series, but Oakland have won 104 games. They're tremendously powerful, McGuire, Canseco, and they're ahead 4-3 going to the bottom of the ninth inning of Game 1 at Dodger Stadium. They bring in Dennis Eckersley, who was just about untouchable, case closed, he'll mow everybody down, gets the first two guys out. Mike Davis comes up and gets a walk. And you all remember what happened. Kirk Gibson comes up to pinch hit. Now, Vin Scully is calling the game on television with Joe Garagiola, and I'm hosting the pre- and post-game show. And so they send me down to the dugout to wait and then jump on the field afterwards and interview somebody. And so I go down the tunnel, and I'm standing in the corner of the Dodger dugout. I figure I can talk to Tommy or whomever. I can run across the field and get La Russa if the A's win the game. And technically, an announcer's not supposed to be in the dugout when the game is going on. And Gibson had gone back down the tunnel, and they had put a ball on a tee for him. They had a bat boy back there, and he was putting balls on a tee for him, and Gibson was seeing if he could take a swing, and you'd hear him grunt in pain and discomfort. You know, you hear the thwack of the bat, thwack, and now Lasorda goes down to check on him to see how he's doing, and Ben Hines, his batting coach, comes back with a report, walks past me, and I hear him say to Tommy, he thinks he's got one good swing in him, which is like a line from a bad baseball movie. You know? Who's writing this ridiculous script? And then Tommy walks down the tunnel to kind of take a quick look and see if Gibson's okay. And then he walks back and he sees me. And this may come as a shock to you, but Tommy can be profane during the course of a ball game. And Tommy was always great to me, but when he saw me there, he says, and he'll do anything to rally his troops, he says, look at this. They bleep and think the bleeping game is over, so they bleep and sent bleeping Costas down here to read our bleeping epitaph. I mind my own business, Tommy, just over here by the bat rack. So then Gibson comes up, and in fact, he does hit the impossible home run. And I jumped out on the field, and as soon as he crossed home plate, he came over for the interview. So that would be one that I'd remember. Yep.
Coach Lasorda, in your time managing with the Dodgers, how have you changed your strategies to motivate your players, other than cursing out reporters?
How have you had to change your approach to motivating your players over the years?
Well, I believed in motivation, and I went to Mass in New York, and Cardinal O'Connor said to me, every time I listen to you, you're always talking about motivation. Do you believe that you have to motivate guys making $5 million, $8 million? I said, absolutely. Everybody in this country, from the President of the United States on down to the lowest job, at some time need to be motivated. Because they think they're doing their best, and in reality they aren't. He said, well, when did you start believing in motivation? I said, I knew the day that I could motivate players. I was managing Spokane of the Pacific Coast League. We're playing in Tucson. We're winning 2-1. Bottom of the 8th inning. And I had a little left-hand pitcher on the mound named Bobby O'Brien. And I thought, now let me go out and get this young man fired up. If he gets this guy out, we're going to win this game. So I went out to the mound and I said, Bobby, if the heavens could come apart, and you could hear the voice of the big Dodger in the sky talking to you. And he says to you, Bobby, the last hitter you're going to face on earth, and you're going to die and come to heaven with me. I said, son, how would you like to go facing the Lord? Giving up a base hit or getting this guy out? He said, Skipper, I want to go facing the Lord, getting this guy out. I said, then how do you know that when you make that next pitch that you're not going to die? And if you are going to die, son, I want you to die getting this guy out. Ran back to the dugout, and before I can get in the dugout, he threw the ball, and the guy got a base hit, and they went ahead 4-3. Now I got to go take him out, and I'm saying, man, I had this guy right where I wanted him. And I said, what happened to you, son? He said, Skipper, you had me so afraid of dying, I couldn't concentrate on motivation. If I can get them to believe they're going to die, I sure as hell can get them to believe they can play.
Not to play Can You Top Yourself, but I'll never forget this, and this also came from the '88 postseason. I'm sitting in your office in the clubhouse, and I'm asking you how you motivated your team during the course of the season. And you start to tell me the story that you told your team about the 1927 Yankees.
Right. We had lost 7 in a row. I come in the clubhouse. They're all sitting there with their heads hung. I said, I don't want anybody hanging their heads here. You guys lost 7 in a row, not because you didn't put out, not because you didn't play hard. You just didn't get the breaks. And I said, tell them something that'll make an impact on them. I said, I'll tell you, 3 weeks ago, they took a poll on all the sports writers in America. What was the greatest team in the history of baseball? And they voted on the 1927 Yankees. And I said, do you realize the 1927 Yankees lost 9 in a row? And you guys have only lost 7. So let's go. So I get in the car and my wife said, what took you so long? And I told her. And now we turned around, we win 10 in a row. We're driving home and my wife said, boy, I remember when you told them about the 27 Yankees. She said to me, did the 27 Yankees really lose 9 in a row? I said, how the hell do I know? That was the year I was born.
We might as well just get off the stage.
Yes, sir.
My question for Mr. McClain and Mr. Bagwell. In 2005, the Chronicle had pretty much written you dead at 15 and 30. Can you explain how y'all rebounded from a deficit like that and got all the way to the World Series and the emotions that took place during that?
Yeah. You know, a lot has been said about that. You know, that article, how we were dead, the rest in peace thing. To be honest with you, even if the players want to come out and say that that's what motivated them to play better, that's a lie. It just doesn't happen like that. It's like Tommy motivated him to go 10 in a row. It really probably wasn't the speech, no offense.
It worked, didn't it?
It did work. But he probably had his best pitcher pitching the next day. That helped too. And we probably had Roy pitching. But well, you look at a baseball season; it's 162 games. You're going to have times where you're going to lose 7 in a row. The best teams do. It just happens, and there's such a big cycle throughout the season. It's the teams that can kind of keep guys a little bit higher that work. In that year, our guys, they just meshed, and they started to get big hits at big time. We had great pitching. You know, when you run out Oswalt, Clemens, and Pettit every 3 days, that's pretty solid. That always helps winning streaks, and I think that's a big thing. But I think with us in that season, we weren't the best team in the world, but we believed in each other, and what we did as a club is we pulled for each other more than I saw of any club that I played on. Each guy, I don't care if it was a backup guy or it was your second baseman, your shortstop, they pulled for each other every single night. And it was from the first inning to the 9th inning. And I think that's why we were successful.
Well, 2005 was a magical season for the Houston Astros, and we did struggle the first part of the season, the middle part, and Jeff talked about the team just came together. That's the unusual thing about baseball. There's not a real reason why things start working sometimes. But they did come together, and our pitchers really, really did extremely well. We got the key hits to win the game. Jeff got a key hit in a playoff game that won the game for us. So it's unusual things that occur. And you all have your stories as baseball players and strategists, and I'm the businessman in the game. The unusual thing in 2005, all of you remember, it shows you how baseball is just one pitch sometimes. As you can remember, in 43 years, we've never gone to the World Series. We were in Houston. We were up 4-1 playing St. Louis. We had a 2-run lead in the top of the ninth. We had 2 outs, nobody on base, and lo and behold, we got a hit and a walk, and you remember Albert Pujols showed up. That was probably my lowest point in my baseball career. And we had to go back to St. Louis in 2005, and we only needed to win 1 game, and we were off to the World Series. But if you'll think back the year before, in 2004, we went to St. Louis under the same set of circumstances, and we only had to win 1 game, and we were off to the World Series. We lost both games. St. Louis is one of the best baseball towns in the major leagues. Huge tradition there. Hard to win there. And so here we were going back in 2005, had lost under the same situation, and went to that next game that we were going to play, Game 6. And Roy Oswalt was going to be our pitcher. There is nothing more tradition in America than the ritual in Major League Baseball. Went to the ballpark. Astros were taking batting practice. 24 players were out on the field participating in batting practice, and with tradition, the starting pitcher was in the clubhouse. No, for some reason, why are we not supposed to talk to them, Tommy, just before they go out and pitch? They're sitting in there by themselves. Nobody else is in the clubhouse. So I just knew we had to win this game. It was going to ride on Roy Oswalt. I'd gotten to know Roy extremely well. Roy is a very reserved person. He's from Weir, Mississippi, a small town of 400. 3 words is about all he gives sometimes, is it not, Jeff? And sometimes you got to work to get 3 words out of Roy. He's one of the greatest competitors in baseball today. And getting to know Roy, I asked him what he really tried to talk to all of the players and what are their goals. And he told me one time one of his goals was to own a bulldozer. Well, I've had them tell me they want yachts, they want Rolls Royce, and all sorts of things. And he told me he wanted a bulldozer. And I said, why? He said his job is harvesting pine trees in Mississippi and Georgia, and that he has to hire someone else to come in and clean out the stumps. And he said, I'd like to own a bulldozer one day. So I went into the clubhouse, and there, the only person in the big clubhouse was Roy, and he was leaning over, had a towel over his head, wasn't saying a word, just leaning over. And I went to him, and I started giving him one of Tommy's motivational talks. He didn't even recognize I was there. He just didn't move, didn't remove the towel from his head, and just continued to lean over like that. And I talked to him for about 4 or 5 minutes. I was getting nowhere. I thought, spur of the moment, Roy, if you win this game tonight, I'll buy you a brand new bulldozer. He jumped straight up. And he said, you got a deal. And Jeff, don't you think he pitched one of the greatest games he's ever pitched in his entire life?
Sure did. You see what I'm saying? You notice how he goes to Oswalt to say that. He didn't go to the 5th starter.
Well, I've learned a little bit about baseball.
It was a tremendous game. That was when he struck out Pujols in the 1st inning. I knew something good was going to happen.
Yes, ma'am.
My dad took us to the opening day game, and he didn't have sons, so he drug his daughters, and I've loved baseball ever since, have 2 ball players. And I know the mechanics and the statistics, but I was interested in the emotional side of it, because I've always wondered this. I know it's a business, but you've got to get close to people, and y'all were the killer bees, Biggio, Bagwell, and Bell, and I just wondered when Bell left and then you left, was that emotional? Do you get close to people like that, or is it really just a business?
This goes back to when I did my opening little whatever I did, that 5 minutes where I was talking. What I was thinking about saying too is what this game brings to us. As much as we love the game, it's the relationship that we take away from this game. I mean, you got to remember we have 25 guys in that locker room. I mean, that's your family for 7.5 months. Derek Bell, I love Derek Bell. I loved all my team. I've had wonderful teammates for my 14 years that I played with the Astros. I loved all of them. All of them were different, which makes it great. That's what I love about the game is it brings different nationalities, different personalities, different everything into the game, and you learn to adapt. The godfather of my 2 children is Dominican. I mean, you get to meet special people, and each of those people that you meet, you have a certain relationship with. And I had a great relationship with Derek, as I did with Craig, as I did with Jeff Kent, as I did with Casey Candela. We just go down the line, and that's the special, special part of the game. You know, Joe talked about what Pete Rose did. You just feel for these people, and they're your family.
My question is for Jeff. How do you transition from being a standout leader on the field to becoming a member of the club leadership?
Well, it's definitely a different side. The good part about me, what's happened is Ed Wade has traded away all our players. So,
player to a front office guy.
So I really don't know these guys that well, so I can be a lot more honest with everybody about. Have to worry about. No, you need to send that kid down. I don't know him, so he can send him down. But it's definitely different. When I go to the games, I truly miss playing. But to be on this side of it with Drayton and sitting watching the game from a box, to go watch our young kids play, it's just another part of my life. Baseball was, a big part of my life as a player, but now it's a different part where I get to help these kids with, different stories, different feelings that I had, and that can make them better. Then it's fun for me.
One here, then we'll come back over here.
To Mr. Morgan and Mr. Bagwell, regarding the leadership in the clubhouse, you can't depend on the manager every night. The importance of that leadership, and how is that developed in the clubhouse?
Joe? I've always said that you can't designate a leader. By that I mean Drayton can tomorrow say whomever is the captain. That means he's the captain. That doesn't mean he's the leader. The players choose who to follow. And I've always felt like the leader's not always the guy that strikes out the guy with the bases loaded. He's not always the guy that gets a base hit to drive in a winning run. To me, the leader of a team is when he goes to bat, everything he does on that field every day, the players know he's thinking about the team first and himself second. That's what a leader of a baseball team is. His job is to help create wins for the team. Gene Mock said something to me once a long time ago, and I always remembered it my first year after I wanted to kill him a couple of times, but we were at an All-Star game. And Gene Mock said, if you do your job for the team, you look up at the end of the season, your statistics will be where they should be. So I guess the point is, again, not the guy that gets the hit or whatever, but the guy that everybody knows is thinking about the team first and himself second.
Jeff? Well, I totally agree with Joe, and I think what he said is absolutely correct. Is the players will tell you who the leader is. It's not the highest paid guy. It's not the best player on the team. It works out nice if that's the case, but most of the time it doesn't work out like that. I think a big part of a leader has to be able to guy in the clubhouse who takes the manager's job on himself, not screaming and yelling really at somebody and embarrass them, but take them to the side and discuss why it would be better for the team to do it this way. You have to be able to, relate to all different parts of your teams. They're just like anything. There's cliques and stuff like that, but you got to be able to get around. But Joe, more than anything, is right. It's the guy that the teammates know cares about the team and not himself.
Yes, sir.
I hope my question doesn't rain on this great parade that we're having here. Mr. McLean, I have a question. It looks like the U.S. Congress is wanting to get in the middle of running baseball's business regarding prohibited substances and so forth. Do you see some other options or some other processes for working through that within the industry? And then if you do have any time, any comments about farm clubs? Thank you for coming.
Well, that's a very complicated subject that has been around for a period of time and has really come to a head in the last 6 or 8 months. And it's unfortunate that Congress selected this as a showcase. I think there possibly could have been some other things Congress was focusing on in our nation rather than that particular issue. But that's where we are today, and I think we need to work through this. Baseball has an unusual process, and we have a commissioner. And the commissioner has a clause that what's in the best interest of baseball. He has to work with the Players Association. We have a contract with the Players Association, and we can't do things without they have the right of anything that affects them, that we have to negotiate that. I think baseball needs to work through these issues and determine how we solve this problem going forward rather than backwards.
This is for all you guys. I was wondering, what was your favorite Astrodome memory? And to Mr. Tassis, if you miss NBA on NBC?
Well, I enjoy doing the NBA, but I miss Major League Baseball on NBC more than I miss the NBA on NBC. I mean, luckily, I've had a chance to do just about everything, and I certainly enjoy covering the NFL as well. But the one that I miss of the properties we don't have, the one that I miss the most is probably baseball. And an Astrodome memory, Jeff?
Well, I gave you some earlier, for sure. I think with the Astrodome, coming from the East Coast, and you heard about the Astrodome, the first day I actually walked in there and looked up at that roof and kind of went, whoa, this is interesting. Obviously I'd never been to an indoor stadium or anything like that, so I think that was one of the big moments. I went through the Darryl Kyle and the 97 club, the 99 club, when we won the division, and they had a big celebration afterwards with the best Astros of all time. That was a big moment, but people always ask me, they say, what do you think about the Astrodome? What if you played somewhere else? Your numbers would have been so much better. I mean, I truly love the Astrodome. It was a great place to play. Whether it was bigger or not, it didn't matter. It was home for me. It was the first place I got a chance to play in the big league, so I loved it there.
Joe?
I was there when they opened the Astrodome. I was part of the first team that ever played there. And I'm glad Bob and Ken Estelante is here. Bob especially.
There they are.
I've been arguing for years about who hit the first home run in the Astrodome.
Mickey Mantle.
No.
Yeah.
No. Bob Asomani is sitting right there. Just so you know,
didn't Mantle hit a homer in an exhibition game?
Wait a minute. Let me talk here. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
But this has been a sore point with me. I actually have the clippings at home if you ever want to see them. I hit the first home run in the Astrodome. I lit up that scoreboard first with the bull and all that stuff. Now, we played a game the day before against our AAA team. I never forget, Danny Coombs, big left-handed pitcher, was pitching. And I hit a home run, first home run in the Astrodome in the game. Next day, Mickey Mantle hits a home run. Who's Joe Morgan? Mickey Mantle's famous, Hey, they didn't even know if I was going to stay there the whole year. Mickey Mantle is famous, so they say Mickey Mantle hit the first home run in the Astrodome. Bob Asomani's here, so he knows I hit the first home run in the Astrodome.
I stand corrected. There you go.
So obviously that's my fondest memory, the first home run in the Astrodome.
Tommy, you got an Astrodome memory?
Let me see. I got tired trying to pick up those balls that those pitchers used against our team.
Are you talking about like maybe Mike Scott and guys like that?
Everybody, I got 24 balls. I told our bad boy, every foul ball, you go get it. 24 balls, and every one of them was sanded on the same spot. And I mailed them to Giamatti, the president of the National League, and heard from him. I called him 2 weeks later. I said, hey, Bart, what do you think? I send them balls for your grandson to play with? And them balls are sanded. Never said anything else.
That's a little hypocritical, though, Tommy.
Why?
What about Don Sutton? The day we were playing, and Sparky took all of Tommy John's and Don Sutton's balls. Exactly the same thing. They're all stuffed on the belt at the exact same spot.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
You didn't know that, right? Yeah. Sparky Anderson did the same thing. Every time they foul a ball, bring it over here. So we had a whole box of them. And they sent them to the commissioner. I can't even remember who the commissioner was. I said, Sparky, you hear from him? He said, nope. Never heard from him. Sutton and Tommy John, it was awful.
Hey,
so
Joe.
You should not bring things up like that.
Hey, Joe.
He had two guys. He's talking about one guy, Mike Scott. You had two of them.
Danny Darwin is one of our pitching coaches.
Right.
He put a ball in my golf cart that was all scuffed up.
Oh, yeah, right.
He knew that's what he used to do.
Yeah, right.
Yes, ma'am.
I know there's a lot of college athletes in here, and I was just wondering, do y'all have any general advice for us, and what made your dreams come true?
Advice for college athletes.
Well, I'm as I was talking about Asmani today, I'm very proud. I have twin daughters that are 17 years old, and they're getting ready to go to college. And one's going to play soccer at USC, and the other one's going to be a gymnast for Stanford. So, the things I try to pass along to them is forgetting about the athletic part of college, because, my daughter's not going to make the Olympics. My other daughter's not going to play in world soccer or whatever, because that's not the point. But, I've always said to my daughters, when you go to college, the first thing you think about is your education. I mean that. Forgetting athletics is just a way to get there. Athletics is going to get them into the college. But I've always said to them, the quality of your life will always be directly related to the quality of your education. And that's the way I teach my kids.
Mr. Lasorda, what was your favorite game against the Giants?
Dodgers' favorite game against the Giants.
Mine. How about mine?
He does have one, but Tommy doesn't want to hear about it. Tommy, your favorite game against your arch rivals, the San Francisco Giants.
Well, when Joe Morgan hit the home run off of Terry Forster,
1982,
to beat us, the first baseman, Will Clark, and the third baseman, what was his name, Matt Williams?
Yeah. Williams, right.
They were jumping up and down on that field like crazy. I said, we'll get you. And then, when Mike Piazza drove in 8 runs, and they went down where they were supposed to go to play, the Atlanta Braves coming to play at
in 93. In 93.
Mike Piazza drove home runs. I went out on the side of the dugout. Yeah. Go home. Go home.
So I take it that none of this stuff was ever personal for you.
I hated the Giants, and I'll always hate them. I'll go to my deathbed hating them.
This may be our last one, and then we'll wrap this portion of it up. Go ahead, sir.
My beginnings with baseball were as a little boy with transistor radio, listening to St. Louis Cardinals. And while Lou Brock and Bob Gibson were my baseball heroes, Jack Buck was a member of my family in my mind. I was going to see if Mr. Costas could talk about the relationship of baseball with radio and maybe who your favorite broadcasters are.
For all the great broadcasters who handle games nationally, and this actually even includes baseball broadcasters nationally, there's nothing like the relationship between a local baseball announcer and his audience. I'm part of a panel that every year has the impossible task of selecting which broadcaster goes into the broadcasters wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And this year it was Dave Niehaus, the longtime voice of the Seattle Mariners. Vin Scully, Red Barber, Ernie Harwell, Kurt Gowdy, Harry Carey, Jack Buck, all of them have long since been enshrined. And now it's mostly guys that have been around a long time as voices of a given team. And after the selection is made, the committee in the Hall of Fame, Dale Petrosky, the president of the Hall of Fame, is seated right here, and the people at Cooperstown have been gracious enough to donate a good portion of the items you see in the baseball exhibit at the Bush Library. And Dale knows that this is the case. You select someone, that person is worthy. But you know that to someone in Toronto or in Cincinnati or wherever, their guy is 100 times more worthy. So you get the letter that says, only an idiot could think that anyone other than Joe Nuxall should be inducted into the broadcasters wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, I guarantee you that this guy in Cincinnati has never heard one word that Dave Niehaus has ever spoken.
I didn't find that letter, Dave.
But if we had elected Nuxall, we got the same letters from Seattle. Everybody thinks Now, some of these guys actually are great announcers, like Vin Scully, a tremendous craftsman. Others, it isn't so much that they're great announcers, but they built up that connection through the years because you listen to them day in and day out. It's not exactly like football where you sit in front of the television and say, this is the big game, the Saturday game or the Sunday game, and you gather around. Baseball is just kind of there. You're at the beach, you're on the back porch, you're barbecuing, you're driving along in the car, and you pick up an inning here and a little bit here and there, and that person's voice, especially if they're with your team for a long time. Vin Scully's been the only Dodger announcer since they came out there in 1958 from Brooklyn. Jack Buck and Harry Carey did the Cardinal games forever, and Jack was the Cardinal announcer from 1954 until his death in 2002. Those people are part of the soundtrack of your summer and ultimately the soundtrack of your life, and especially now in an era where players, Biggio, Bagwell, exception, but even great players tend to not spend their entire career with a single team. It's very often the voice of the team that's most identified with that team in the hearts and minds of the fans. So that kind of relationship is just one of the things that's part of the fabric of baseball. And it's actually one of the things that drew me into this profession. I couldn't separate, growing up on Long Island, I could not separate the Yankees from the voices of Red Barber or Mel Allen. I couldn't separate the New York Knicks from the voice of Marty Glickman. When the Mets came along, Lindsey Nelson or Ralph Kiner or Bob Murphy calling their games. And I used to sit in my father's car when I was like 9, 10 years old. I'd take the keys to my dad's car because radio reception was better outside in the driveway than in the house. And I would turn the ignition on, and then I would twist the dial on the radio like a safecracker, just trying to calibrate it to get exactly the right spot. And if it was the right night and conditions were right, you'd get the Reds out of Cincinnati with Waite Hoyt, who had been a teammate of Babe Ruth's in the 20s, on WLW. Another notch down the dial, Harry Carey and Jack Buck. Over here, Ernie Harwell coming out of Detroit. Over here, Chuck Thompson coming out of Baltimore. And they were all sponsored by a different beer. Now it's all either Budweiser or Miller. They own the world. But if you listen to Bob Prince do the Pittsburgh Pirates on KDKA, he was trying to get you to drink Iron City. And in Baltimore they wanted you to drink National beer. And in Cincinnati they wanted you to drink a Hudipole, right? A Hudipole 14K. And up in Boston, High Neighbor Habagansett. And that was part of the regional and local feel that cemented that bond between the fan and their local club. It's really an important aspect of baseball.
I'd like to thank all our panelists for the wonderful performance. Wasn't this enjoyable?